Right now, I would like to bring up Fabian Pelzl to talk about emotional interfaces. Please welcome Fabian.
So who knows this movie? Oh, so not everybody. So it's only roughly 50%, I guess. So for those of you who don't know this movie, it's actually about an ordinary human, Theodore, who falls in love with a digital assistant, which is embodied through a female voice in a movie called Samantha. And let's pause there for a second, right? So do you think that this actually could happen, that a human can fall in love with something technical, like an embodied personal assistant? Probably not, right? But if you think about it and make a little thought experiment, probably the thing what we need for an emotional relationship are emotions, right? And I think, do you think that current digital interfaces or personal assistants already are capable of using emotions? Did you ever try out? Well, I did. I asked Alexa, "Hey Alexa, I'm sad."
Sorry to hear that. Talking to a friend, listening to music, or taking a walk may help. I hope you feel better soon.
Exactly. I think it's a neat skill what they programmed for Alexa, but somehow let's analyze it a little bit, because to me it doesn't really feel like really emotional. Because what she's actually saying is, okay, I'm not capable of emotions. Please talk to a friend, to a real human, right? And so the input, I'm not sure, or the output, sorry. And if you look into the input, who would actually really communicate sadness that way, right? Saying, Alexa, I'm sad. So, and this is also what my research question basically was about, which is, can emotions improve the human-machine interaction? And my background is actually in human-machine interaction. Sorry for that. So a lot UI design, UX design, so we always try to improve the whole experience, the interface for the user. And currently, the last few months, I've stayed at Stanford at the Center for Design Research to also explore this topic on emotional interfaces. And since it is all about emotions today, I thought I'm going to make a little drama today. And since any good drama in Greek, we have also 3 acts. And the first act, I want to tell you about our very first emotional interface, what we created, which started basically 2 years ago. Then I want to deep dive a little bit into what emotions really are, trying there to deconstruct human emotions. And third, I show you the most current research project, what we did, which is about emotions in negotiation. And I'm a true believer that actually, if I talk here only and you guys just listen, probably most of what I've said you will forget. So that's why I try to make it really interactive. And that's why I also have some tasks today with me where I really would appreciate your participation. So that would be great. So let's start with the first act, which is about designing emotional interfaces. And before we do that, I want to give you like a little bit of theory, not too much. I really try to be, a little scientific today. So let's talk about emotions first in human-to-human communication, because for us as human-machine interaction designers, we always look, how do humans actually do that? And how are emotions communicated in our day-to-day life? Well, first, obviously, we have the verbal channel, which is about the content, about the semantics, so just saying like, Alexa, I'm sad. We also have a paraverbal channel, which is, for instance, the tone. So when I speak really high right now and really fast, right, you guys probably think, okay, what's going on with the guy? Is he nervous? I don't know. Or even pauses, which could be a little awkward. And also nonverbal, right? So if I'm being here like this, and really, you probably get the feeling, again, like what's wrong with the guy? He's really closing up. Or when I'm going like this, I really show you, hey, I'm here, I'm present. So we also transport emotions about non-verbal channels, which are like gestures, mimics, and posture. So now I have the first task, and I really would love if all of you could join on that. And this includes first that all of you close their eyes. And now I really want you to think about today and a certain emotional situation. Shift through the day, I'm sure there was a certain emotional situation. If it wasn't today, maybe during the week. And what I'm now going to do, or first, please find an adjective or a noun which describes this emotion. And now I'm going to count from 1 to 3. And on 3, all of you open your eyes and say this emotion out loud. Scream it out loud as fast as you can. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, I heard a lot of stuff in here. So I heard joy and happiness, which is nice. What else? You guys have to help me a little bit because I'm bad with multitasking. What else did I hear? Gratitude. Great. Sadness. Shock. Anger. Okay. Maybe one more. Confusion. Okay, nice. Thank you. We are going to need them later. But for now, I want to show you, and I think there was a great movie about that, which basically told us how emotions are perceived in society, and I didn't want to miss the chance to show the little trailer of that.
So, how was the first day of school?
It was fine, I guess. I don't know. Do you ever look at someone and wonder what is going on inside their head?
Did you guys pick up on that?
Sure did.
Something's wrong. We're going to find out what's happening, but we'll need support. Signal the husband.
With a nice pass over Reed, comes across center ice.
Uh-oh, she's looking at us. What did she say?
What? Oh, sorry, sir. No one was listening.
Is it garbage night? We left the toilet seat up. What? What is it, woman? What?
Signal him again.
So, Riley, how was school?
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
For this, we gave up that Brazilian helicopter pilot?
So I think that was just a perfect example of emotional miscommunication on one hand, and also how our perception is. I think the guys up in Berkeley are really good in, sorry for that, in, trying to analyze how the society is perceiving certain emotions, and this is what they basically came up with. Sorry for that. And they basically had those 5 emotions, which is say that are inherent to all of us. They are everywhere. They're universal, whatever. And and so this theory of basic emotions, which is basically the scientific theory, is actually quite popular. And even as we saw, like in Hollywood, it appears. And actually, you guys just said quite a lot of words like this, like joy. I heard sadness. I heard anger. So these are already 3 of them. And as I said, the theory of basic emotions is the scientific foundation of that. And what they also do, or what it proposes, is a system called FACS, so facial action coding. And this is exactly what you see here. So there are certain landmarks on the face, which basically provide what emotions are. So for instance, if you have like a nose wrinkling and the upper lip is raised, you can also try it right now. This maybe already feels a little bit like disgust, right? So I think that's all what you need to know for now. So let's turn let's do the next step into emotional interfaces. So having covered like a certain idea of emotions, and I think that's important because that's exactly where we started 2 years ago, where we basically designed the first emotional interface. And for, by the way, who is designer, like UX or UI designer in here? Okay, that's great. So most of the people, so for all of you who didn't, so just the basics, right? We have like a human-machine interaction. We have a certain input and a certain output. And in terms of emotions, what we actually do is first that we need an emotion recognition, right? Then second, we have to make sense out of that. So we call it emotion synthesis. And third, we also need to display it. So this is basically what we describe as emotional interface on the easiest layer, let's say. And as we just have seen with those facial landmarks, this is also how most of the emotion technology out there, which is based on, a lot of them is based on vision, so basically mimics, is working, right? So you name it, like Google, IBM, Microsoft, or also like Affectiva, they also have certain algorithms, and this is how it works, that they basically first detect your face, and then they also try to detect what emotion you're actually displaying. And this is also what we came about, and we're playing a little bit with the APIs and really try to build up on this recognition part. But here, and as you probably already can see on the picture, I really try to look really the same. And on the left, basically nothing is detected. And on the right, I'm 100% engaged in joy. And this is really what we basically ran into, because we could not really build on that, because the expression detection was not good enough. So what we actually thought is that, okay, well, if this part is not really working with the recognition, we really wanted to create this emotional interface, well, we actually have an expert who is doing this really well, this emotional recognition part, and that's the human. So for our very first experiment, we said, okay, let's fake that, and a certain operator on our experiment, the experiment supervisor, basically controlled it. One part is now missing, which is the emotional feedback. And most of you probably, since there are a lot of UI and UX designer, have heard about certain colors, for instance. So this was also done in my lab before, like 3 years before I started, is that we used as emotional feedback little robots and also color. So here the idea was to display with certain color patterns and different ranges of colors certain emotional states of the robots. But as you probably might already think, it didn't really work. So we did like certain user tests, and it was not really recognized. And then we thought, okay, man, how should we do this whole emotional feedback part? And then obviously we thought, again, well, there's like an expert on that. And how do we normally express emotions in our digital devices on our day-to-day life? And as we were sitting there during a break, having Instagram up, like one of my favorite ones is actually Little Michaela. I don't know if you know her. That's her. I also follow her. And as you probably see, there's something wrong. Yes, it's not a real human. And she actually has 1.8 million followers, which is quite crazy. So there's a certain attachment, already between humans and certain digital avatars or robots or so on. So why not just create an avatar also to display emotions? But there's a little problem. Have you ever heard about the uncanny valley? Show me. Okay, that's like 40% maybe. So for all of like the 60%, what I thought, again, I really want to try to bring this effect or this phenomenon here into the room rather than only telling you. And for that, I thought we are going to do like a little experiment. We are going to rank 4 robots, those 4. And how are we going to do that is that in Germany, we call that audience applausometer, basically. And this is basically, and this works that you clap the loudest for the robot you favor the most. So on a dimension from, the robot you would first go to and interact with it and play with it, to a dimension, you would consider it the last. This is basically the ranking dimension. And so that we warm up, I first want you all, and also to check whether you understand the principle, just to clap a little bit for the robot who, is on the 4th rank. We'd still clap like a little bit, but politely, right? We are polite people. When whatever, those, or which one you chose, just also make a test for that. So let's be, as enthusiastic as we can. So, hey, woo! Okay. Nice. So you get it. I actually don't want to touch it myself because then there would be a certain bias. So I need like one volunteer who basically tells me afterwards who was ranked 1st and 4th. Who wants to do that? Somebody? Oh yeah, over there. Do you want? Yeah. Okay, you're just going to tell me. So you understand as you understood the concept, right? Okay. So let's start with this one. Okay, decent. Then this one. Okay, way louder. Then this one. Okay, and finally this one. Oh. So now it's your choice. Like, how would you rank? So for what like the last one was? The cougar one or her? The last one. Okay. So close. I mean, it's an experiment. But you brought it closely, right? So I think there was like definitely a tendency. So I think with the human likeliness of the cougar robot, you guys just showed me that was the same. The same was with Sophia, which is the robot where you can still see like that the head is robotic-like. And what you just brought into the room is basically the uncanny valley phenomenon, right? So as long as the robots become more like us, they also increase in likability. But only to a certain point. And at that point, basically the likability decreases again. And then, of course, until the 4th point, where you cannot really tell the difference anymore between human and a normal robot. So this part basically is called the uncanny valley. So having this in mind, we said, okay, we are students, so we are probably not capable of really creating, ex machina kind of robot, which is the one on the top. So let's stay on the left side of the uncanny valley. So I'm going to introduce you Maria. So that's basically Maria. Unfortunately, the first experiment we did in German shows she's only capable of speaking German. So if I would activate her, it's just the same as you would activate like Google or Alexa. You would say, "Hi Maria."
Hallo, was kann ich heute für dich tun?
So she just basically said, "Hi, how can I help you today?" So that's it, right? So that's the emotional feedback received. So I think we have like everything now to put together like an emotional interface, at least for our first study. Oh yeah, there's the emotional use case missing. So it's really important for us if you conduct a study, right, in a scientific context, that you have like a certain use case where you focus on, and where future studies could also basically replicate your results. And we're thinking, well, first it should be a situation which is like naturally to us, right? And second, it should be also a certain situation which is already emotional in itself, because we didn't want to induce emotions from externally, like letting the participants watch certain videos, but having a situation which already is emotional in itself. So we had the perfect idea. We thought, yeah, that's it. We have the use case. Ticket machines. Well, I have to be frank with you guys. It's not only about ticket machines, but at least that's what we told all our participants. But what actually really happened, so this is how it looked in real time, is that we created this little machine and there was an interface. It was like all speech controlled. And we told the participants, here it's 50 euros. Just buy one ticket from Munich to Berlin and try to get the cheapest ticket. And actually, you can keep the change. And the funny part for us, at least, was that there wasn't any change. So, so they paid the 50 euros, right? And tried to get like 20 euros out of that. And this is then basically what we actually analyze is the whole service process. So, whether it was she was also helping, well, you could refund or so on. And this is actually what we looked at. And we really hope that this already create, like in itself, certain emotion, because people would think, they just lost 21 euros. And this is also what all participants were told. But as I told you, it was not really like this. Like we actually told the participants, well, here's a camera, here, the assistant will see you, and and it's all working, obviously, because, NLP and emotional technologies, and it's all top-notch. But this is what really happened. So it was not really automated, but rather we had a Skype connection from the camera over here to the human operator, and the operator basically was triggering certain videos which were displayed to the user, so the user had the feeling, that it was really working quite well. And interestingly, I think, it was only 2 persons who did not believe that this was actually really working. So I think in terms of, faking it, we did a good job. How many people? It was 60 people who did the whole experiment. But that's a good question, because it leads to my next slide. Well, let's skip that. I actually deleted those ones because it's too much. But maybe this one. So basically, we had 3 different interfaces, which was like only voice controlled, where you couldn't see the avatar at all, and then one with a normal avatar, and then one with an emotional avatar, so that we could really see whether emotions work or not. And interestingly, you see it already here, is that we saw certain effects, but most of them, what we thought is going to happen, we could not prove on a statistically significant level. The only thing what we could prove or show is that the trustworthiness between the normal avatar and an emotional avatar was increasing. And I think that makes quite a lot of sense, because people probably already think when they talk to an avatar that is also going to be emotional, since humans are normally emotional. So this is probably why the non-emotional avatar was perceived as a little bit weird. And the UX, interestingly, our interpretation was that emotions make an avatar more trustworthy. And the user experience, we actually could not really prove on a significant level. And that's why field studies are so nice, since most of you guys are UX or UI design experts, is that we really saw, since we were at the same venue, that people were just way more engaged with the one, speaking to an avatar than it was actually displayed in the data. So we thought, okay, that's interesting. So we would really love to, continue and see when we change certain metrics whether this could change. And then, so this was nice. So this was after the study, like 2 months or so, where we also presented the results. And then a friend of mine who is working, she was traveling with Deutsche Bahn, which is like the railroad company in Germany. And she was sending me this picture, which I thought of, oh, that's interesting, So again, they don't fake Maria, so they do like a real Skype connection, but basically replacing the human operator at the venue. And I thought, well, like, first of all, I think, like, it's a personal opinion, but I like Maria better. And and for sure, she works better on scale. So that was also what really motivated us. So, we just wanted to really make it work, but the problem was how can we get the human operator out of that? And this basically brings me to the second part, which is going to be about human emotions and about, that maybe how we perceive emotions is not the real part, basically, or not the truth. So I'm going to show you now a picture. And again, you have I count from 1 to 3. And on 3, you're going to scream the emotion, what you're going to see. Got that, right? So 1, 2, 3. So I heard pain a little bit over there, and terror, and also happiness, which kind of, it makes sense if you look long at it, and maybe also if you know who she is. But if I give you a little bit context, it becomes obvious, right, that she is probably is one of the most happiest moments in her life. And again, right, when you think how most of our emotion detection algorithm works, that's exactly the part of the face what you're going to look at, not so much to the context. So this explains, first, context is super, super important. And second, when you look at the certain facial landmarks, I'm not sure whether this whole theory still holds true, because if you look into the textbook, this is a way different expression of happiness than between the actor and the actual tennis player. So basically, what brought me the explanation for that was reading the book How Emotions Are Made from Lisa Feldman Barrett, and she is basically saying emotions are not built in; they are just built. And what means that basically she's saying, well, emotions are not universal. They are not inherent. They are not those 5 emotions which drive your actions. They're just built in the moment. And I think, again, to really understand this, I tried to bring this in this room today again. Let's see whether this works better. So I want to show you a term which is called experiential blindness. And for this, I want to show a picture. So what is on the picture? So to those of you who probably have not seen the picture before, really try to make sense out of this picture. They are trying to make sense out, okay, what are those white and black blobs? And your brain is basically trying to predict what this is. It's trying to answer the question, what is this most like? Not what is it, but what it is most like. And this state, what you guys are in case you haven't seen the picture yet, is called experiential blindness. And I'm going to cure now from experiential blindness. Are you ready to be cured? So it's a snake. And now it's really interesting what happens to your brain. What are you seeing now? A snake, right? And I can even train this effect if I do it a little bit often. You see a snake. And that's so interesting. I was really stoked about this example of Lisa Feldman Barrett. And this is also, on the other hand, how neural networks in computing are working, which are, of course, inspired by the brain. So the brain, what happens? It takes sensory input, being visual, auditory, also actually from your body. It's called interoception, and basically puts it into your brain, which is this jelly thing in your skull, which doesn't see light, which doesn't see anything. All it gets is sensory input. And the neurons there try to make sense out of it, try to make sense of certain patterns. And what it's doing is actually prediction. It's really trying to predict what it is most like and not trying to answer what it is. And in fact, you're doing this on a day-to-day basis. So even right now, when I'm speaking, your brains are predicting what next words are coming out of my mouth, exactly. And since our brain is really trying to reduce energy consumption, it's also building up those concepts, which are basically shortcuts, right? Certain beliefs, you probably could even say. And those concepts, basically the one of a snake or even an emotion, are formed, and only with those concepts you're basically you're afterwards experiencing emotions. And just to make this, bring this again to the room, I promise you it's going to be an interactive session. So there's like this noun basorexia. I don't know, like, does anybody know what it means? Okay, it's actually also an emotion, and it's called, and it means the sudden urge to kiss someone. So I mean, everybody has a partner in here, right? So, just kidding. But this is really what I want to try to bring across, that, certain experience, what you did in your, in your lifetime, form those concepts, and those concepts basically make those emotions, or help you to experience emotions. So for instance, your mom tells you, are you happy? Are you happy? Are you happy? Smiles at you, so you're going to, associate that with happiness. So quite a revelation for us, at least, because we were saying like, oh shit, how are you going to make this now into an emotional interface? And the last part, which is basically the most current research we did, was about negotiations. And for that, we conducted an online study. I have to be frank with you guys. I did a second version of this whole presentation, so some of the slides are not, there. But then basically you have to believe me. What we did is that we conducted an online study where we set all our participants that they get a task, which is buying an oldtimer for, I think the starting price was 35,000, but they were only allowed to spend 30,000. So we also advanced not only in the interfaces, but also in the amount of money people spend. Then we, obviously, they really tried to negotiate with a chatbot. And this time we actually only looked into two versions, which was one without an avatar, so just like a conventional chatbot as Google Assistant or, yeah, you name it, and a second one with an avatar. And this is basically the whole, scientific scheme, and I actually don't want to go deep into it. That's also why I deleted. And but I think what is important for you is that we basically left all this logic, which is based on happiness, sadness, anger, and those labels. But what we rather looked at is certain cues. For instance, if people smiled, and since we already knew the context that is going to be in negotiation, then we basically build logic on that. And on a reaction level, this is basically those really short-term and very fast emotions. What happens? So, for instance, when I smile at you, it's really likely that you're smiling back. Or and this is also what we did with our avatar. Also, active listening. We said, like, this is also natural when you're telling me something that I'm going to start to nod. So this is what we put into an avatar on the reaction level. On a routine level, this was more, this is a valence dimension, but I want to go too deep into arousal and valence and what they mean. But we basically made sense not only what we saw in terms of what the people were expressing, but also what the context in terms of price they were telling us. So, for instance, as I said, the starting price was 35,000, and if the player or user said, "I want to buy the car for $5," then this would have been like a really desperate emotional feedback the avatar would have given to the participant. And we also did a reflection level, which is considered in research and also like in normal life as mood often. And there, we also had like a certain logic in place, which said it's basically, you can imagine like a Moroccan dealer on a Moroccan Zeus or something. Like if you continue saying, I only want to pay 10 euro, 15 euro, he's going to get, probably like, or his mood is worse and worse and worse probably. So those three things on a simplistic level we considered in the new emotional interface. And this is basically an example of that.
Hi, my name is Tim.
Tim, nice to meet you.
So he looks at him.
Do you want to see the beautiful Volkswagen 1303? Should I show you around?
Now if Tim looks, so there was always like a certain amount of gear, glance. Yeah, exactly. And when he lost back. And
I have seen it.
Okay, so do you have any question about the car?
Exactly. And like this was only basically the entry and dialogue, and afterwards they really had to negotiate. And this was all this time really automated. So it was like an online study where they did both versions. In the first experiment, they only one user was doing one of the versions basically, and this time they were doing both, like first the conventional and then this version. And only that you also get an idea, how the different expressions look like with an avatar. So that was desperate. This is angry, and again, also those expressions probably are always different in a negotiation use case. This is, as you can guess, can someone guess what it is? Shock, yeah, surprise. That's interesting. Does anybody guess what it is? What was it? Yeah, quite good. I mean, uncertain, insecure, it's quite the same. So very nice. And of course, we always have the neutral position. And then at the end of our study, we also asked the user, whether they perceived the emotions, whether they could decode them correctly. And this was basically how they decoded. So 3 were on a significant level recognized. 2 of them were like, we saw tendencies, but it was not on a significant level. And insecure actually was not on a significant level not recognized, which is due to our understanding probably that insecurity is really hard to display only with an emotional expression. And since they hadn't had any context or any voice or any, what happened before, it's really hard to recognize that. Yeah, let's just this one to end maybe, which was really interesting to us, is that yes, the pragmatic quality, and I'm just like the UX concept for all of you guys who are not UX experts is normally often split into 2 dimensions, which is pragmatic quality, often also reconsidered as usability, and hedonic quality, which is about the pleasure and all of that. And also, and what you see here is that the pragmatic quality was quite bad in both versions, which is probably due that it was a prototype and that it was only trained for one certain use case. So you couldn't ask him, for instance, what the weather is going to be, what some people did. And but what is really interesting is that the hedonic quality was way better for the emotional emotional chatbot than compared to the normal conventional chatbot. So I think that's super interesting, and it also makes a lot of sense with theory, since emotions really are the ones which stimulate us, which is again associated with hedonic quality and so on. Well, for today, I have 3 take-home messages. So in the first part, I showed you what the uncanny valley is, and how it works, and how we constructed a first mocked emotional interface. On the second, I told you what emotions probably are more like, and that there are not really those 5 emotional expressions, what most of you guys know. And last, I told you that we really changed a lot the emotional framework what we had, that we used 3 different time layers, and that we also did like an online study where we could actually show that the UX dimension, the hedonic UX dimension was improved, and also the overall UX on a significant level, actually. Oh, 1 sec. So, and I don't want also to, miss the chance to finish now with the movie Her. I hope I could give you like a little bit emotional talk today. And I really would like to finish with Her, because I think that this was just a really, really smart movie when you consider that it was done in 2013. And they have just great illusions, what you probably now will understand when I show you the scene.
So do you know what I'm thinking right now?
Well, I take it from your tone that you're challenging me. Maybe because you're curious how I work? Do you want to know how I work?
Yeah, actually. How do you work?
Well, basically, I have intuition. I mean, the DNA of who I am is based on the millions of personalities of all the programmers who wrote me. But what makes me, me, is my ability to grow through my experiences. So basically, in every moment, I'm evolving, just like you.
That's really weird.
Is that weird? You think I'm weird?
Kind of.
Why?
Well, you seem like a person, but you're just a voice in a computer.
I can understand how the limited perspective of an unartificial mind would perceive it that way. You'll get used to it.
So my final question is it also weird to you? Thank you.
If you have questions for Fabian, we have 2 mics over here. You could stand up behind the mics and ask your questions.
Like, if you're also interested, like in the, oh, sorry, people. Oh, let me just maybe finish this one. If you're interested, I left out like a lot of the science today, but like all of is scientifically backed. So if you want to talk about that, just approach me later, or I send you whatever you need. So let me know. Let's start.
At one point, you said concepts are caused by energy conservation or related to energy conservation. Would you talk about that a little bit, please?
Well, so so first of all, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I read a little bit in this part, and actually last Thursday I've been to a talk at David Eagleman, who is, I think, like a way better expert in this matter than I am. But basically, what the brain tries to do is, since it's, I think, like the organ who uses most of the energy of the whole body and related to its mass, the body always tries to reduce its energy consumption, and that's why basically it's trying to use certain shortcuts and concepts which are basically formed to use to make a later emotional experience. Like what I also sometimes think about, I have a certain relation to sports sometimes, and there we also talk about, if you just do like let's say tennis, and you do a repetition quite a lot of times, like tennis coaches often tell you, well, you have to do that so that there's like a certain, I just know the German word, but that the movement basically translate into your brain. So maybe that's the same, but I think, I don't know. I'm not the meta expert in neuroscience. No.
So I was wondering, maybe I missed it, but what did you see as the main advantage, especially in the first example with buying the tickets? What was the main advantage of bringing in the emotional, that emotional interface? And like, just as a general rule, like, because I would imagine sometimes it's good to have it and sometimes it's not good, or it's better to not have it. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the challenge there was definitely that we wanted to bring like emotions into it, since we looked at the human-to-human interaction, and emotions play quite a huge role in that. And there we thought, well, in the service process, probably emotions make quite a, could probably improve the whole process quite a bit. Because if somebody shows understanding, maybe you know that from the hotline or whatever, if you had like a bad experience, this would already improve the whole experience. And that's what we basically thought, okay, let's try to bring this into the machine as well. I definitely get the point that probably, it's easier just to get like a ticket. That's probably true. But for the whole, service process, I guess that you can, improve the user experience with a little bit, emotional feeling part of that.
For the interaction with the avatar, what developmental level did you use in regards to the feedback? Because usually for cognitive development, what stage and what profile for the interaction?
Mm-hmm. Could you rephrase your question? I'm not sure. Like, do you want to get the tech stack, or or what?
Between the developmental level of understanding from the avatar to the user, what was the developmental? Yeah, what was the sorry.
What did you say? I didn't get it.
What around the age of between the developmental stages, like of understanding, because most of the time in UX, they always perceive that if they do an interface or a phone, they already know you know how to use the phone, but not in every context, because it depends on age, it depends on demographic, it depends on if there's accessibility issues. So what did you use to create the profile to interact with that person?
Not really to me, sorry.
The developmental stages, if you, let me see, let me try to pick an easy one.
I don't think she's going to refer to the tech stack, right?
I was.
Ah, you were. Okay. Okay. So basically, what we did. So this is like all our web apps, right? So it's a React or MERN stack, basically. So Mongo, React, Node was basically the backend, and what we used to display the avatar, that's called like Unity. That's like for actually a game engine where the avatar lives, so to speak. And is that where you were referring to, or
no? It's like the developmental stages of a child. Like there's the 4 different developmental stages of a child of what their process and understanding. The same thing is for also individuals and adults. Like you can be very smart but not know a particular like I use the context of the phone. You can be very intelligent, PhD, but can't use your iPhone. Can't use all the features of your iPhone. So what developmental level did you use to interact with that other person? Does that make sense now?
Well, to be quite honest, we didn't try to go for a certain developmental age or something. We rather, or what we actually did is that we were talking to like an actor from a local theater in Munich, and also like to a negotiation expert. And from them, we are basically trying to deduct how they would express, when we are in a negotiation situation, how they are basically expressing different emotions, like for instance, insecurity and stuff like that. And from them, we basically modeled the whole emotional expression. And this was basically done first with facial expressions, and also with the prosody, it's called. So there's like a SSML, it's called. So it's a speech markup language, basically, where you can basically say how much is the emphasis of if somebody's going to say something, what's the pitch, what's the tone. I mean, it's a little bit reduced, so it's not it's not that you can already play the whole range what humans can do. But it's all what we can do right now in terms of technological features.
So it was a limited scope.
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you.
Going back to your first, what does the uncanny valley mean for us in practice? Does it mean until we can mimic the human robot perfectly, we should stay on the left side and we should use more simplistic ways of programming robots? And does that have an implication for the development of robots at this stage?
Yeah, so I think that's basically every designer's choice. I think there are also like different companies out there who are way more realistic than we were. And I think like the most important thing is to be aware of that there's like, if you do like user studies or UX studies, that, parts of those results could be that you're basically just in the valley, and that's why the UX evaluation is super, super bad, for instance. The second part of your question, I forgot. Like the implementations of.
Yeah, does it mean until we're perfect and mimicking an actual human interface, we should not try to do that, but rather stay in a more simplistic way? Would that be a takeaway?
I don't know, to be honest. I would say I think you always have to think about a certain what the trade-off is. So I don't know. Probably Google has a good reason for not having already like an avatar. Probably that's the reason, because it's you still see that it's not really working. I don't know, but maybe in a certain garage they're also playing with this type of stuff. The thing is, what is super, super hard is actually this creation to make it like lifelike. So also like the small movements, how often it looks at you, and so on and so forth. So there's like a tons of considerations what you have to take into account if you're designing like a human being. And I think like there's like a lot of research going on with CGI, and that I think will also for emotional expressions will help a lot the whole field. Also,
hey, in the third act, in the online survey, online negotiation experiment, you said that there was a chatbot with an avatar and one without, and then you spoke about the hedonic and pragmatic qualities of based on the user. What about from the other side? Which one was the better negotiator? Which one got a better price? And if there are any implications of that?
That's a good question. To be honest, like we have so much data, we did not look into all of that. But this question also interested us. So there's basically two effects. One is that whatever starts first, the second or the follow-up experiments, people always tried to do it harder. That's basically because of the experience design or of the whole study design. And we also saw that with the avatar, since it was created quite, let's say, friendly, because we had this impression of a person really trying to make you comfortable in order to sell a car. And there's also research about if you make it really friendly, people tend to be more aggressive on what they, in terms of their negotiation strategy. So there's like, I can send you the research if you're interested in, into that. So
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hi. Excellent presentation. Thanks for sharing. Also on the third act, I was just curious if you might be able to elaborate a little bit on the online study that you conducted. Just, I don't know if it's the number of users, how you found participants.
That experience. So, and this is also, so as soon as the paper is out, you can also see all the limitations, because this is actually a good one in terms of, you always have this experimental effect sometimes. So what we did, we had 50 participants. That was basically the level we wanted to reach. And what basically we had do you want to know more about like how we, okay, I'm just going to tell you, and then you so we had, we basically started, we spread the word like basically mostly through university networks. And I'm also doing like an add-on program where like, more educational, more grown-ups, I would say, so not only students are part of, and also here like on Stanford. And This is basically how we try to acquire the participants, where you can already could argue, well, maybe they knew you, and this is why they might have responded just as they thought that you expect them to respond. And this is one part. And in total, we made it 50 people, and we had certain requirements to count. It was way more. I think it was like 180 or something until we got until those 50 people. But we said at least every person needed to do 6 interactions with each of the chatbot, because otherwise you cannot really, evaluate the whole experience. Second was, of course, that the whole study was completed, and the third one was. So I think that's also important to note. It wasn't really a condition, but that they could have come to an agreement or not, because it was also possible to not come to an agreement, actually. And yes, if this question is going to come, if it came not, if there was no agreement, also the whole interface was rated, less in terms of user experience or poorer. From? Oh, yeah. So that was basically just someone we knew who is really good with, who basically is doing those, audible. What is audible? Voiceovers, exactly. Yeah.
The implications of your research are really interesting, because at the very end, right, you showed how you had a ticket purchasing, experiment, right, with the avatar, and how the German train company is actually doing a very similar thing, right, like having somebody remotely communicate in. So if you extrapolate out like 20 years, advanced technology and stuff, right, there's a potential that this type of avatar technology could replace a person. And you mentioned that it scales better, right? But something that I'm really interested in now is that as these types of technologies are becoming more publicly available, I think that there's a generational difference in openness to interacting with and participating in that type of technology. I'd imagine that younger people are more open to it. Older folks are more interested in interacting with a human. I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on how the technology community and the research community can bridge that gap between the parts of society that are open to these technologies and the parts that aren't.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really important question. I think every researcher who is in this part, who does like artificial intelligence, and I think that's a thread which basically always comes up. I don't know where to start, basically. But what we try to do is basically to improve the existing interfaces. That's for the first part. But of course, you always have to, be aware what else that could lead to. Is that, like, for instance, replacing an operator or something like that. And I think the good part on our research is that till now the human operator is just way better, right? So I think that we need still some time, but I think it's totally crucial that we also talk about the ethical and societal implications about that. That's for sure. But that's also the interesting part, at least for me, as doing this for research, which is always basically directed to, I would say, to the whole community and to the society. So we don't have any monetary interest, I would say, in whether this is going to work or not, rather than exploring the whole area. But yeah, I'm also don't want to basically try to talk me out of the definitely that also we are basically in charge of whatever we are researching and putting out of there. But yeah, I don't know, it's a whole different talk, I guess, to go really deep into that. But yes, we definitely take this into consideration. And yeah, actually at my home university and TU, there we're also building currently a huge institute which are addressing exactly those questions, which are really important to discuss. And about the difference in age, it's just super different, at least for us as students, to also approach or to get to a different demographic, right? And this first online study actually was also kind of designed to be a first pilot, and then maybe doing that like on larger scales on a mechanical Turk, for instance. But again, there we have a certain, technological affinity, which is normally to the younger generation. But on the other hand, if you think about care, for instance, I think that because I know like a lot of those social robots are used in care, and I'm not too sure how it works in US, but at least in Germany, we have quite a problem with having people who are caring for their elderly. So there's like also a total whole research lab basically who's doing this, assistive robots in the hospital or so on. And I think, some of those emotional implications maybe can also improve this research in that area. So.
Did you get a chance when they interacted on product, did you get a chance to get feedback from how was your experience or rate their experience?
From the participants in the first one? Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And did you utilize that in other chatbots and then utilize that and then do a comparison to expand your data that you haven't already touched upon? Because it's already been written, if they already got tasted, then might as well not reinvent the wheel. Use that and then expand upon that.
Yeah, definitely makes a lot. I think. I mean, we are not really done yet, right? So there's like still like a lot of going on. But were you referring to the first one or to the last one I showed, to the online side, to the first one, with the ticket machine? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's actually a good idea. Maybe we Like, because what we did is basically we actually also did not publish the first thing because like different story, but yeah. So I think last question because already people are leaving and then yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your presentation. Why did you choose the car negotiation as like your subject to try out this project? Like, what is it about negotiation?
So two things basically. First, we needed something what we could conduct like in our online study, and there's like tons of research on negotiation and chatbots actually, and that's also basically the second part is that emotions play quite a crucial role in human decision making, and that's why the whole negotiation process by itself is already emotional. And again, we always need like a use case which has the possibility to become emotional. So just getting a ticket probably would not work. So that's why we came up with this one. And it was like one of four, and what could have been different possibilities basically, and we chose this one because of that reason. Yeah. Good. Thank you.
Please give Fabian a big round of applause. Thank you so much for a wonderful talk. Really enjoyed this topic.